like one of the hard things about live streaming is like it's such a feels like such a like there's too many buttons. You know what I mean? Just like what are all these buttons doing? Okay, it looks like something's coming through.
Hey.
Sweet.
That looks right.
Yeah. Got some fun little ambiance going on the YouTube stream. Okay, it looks like YouTube's up. So if you all go to YouTube, it should be there. And audio's looking good. That is great. Cool.
Quick little, if you hit start recording, if it doesn't eat too much.
Oh,
then you can
yeah.
or does it eat too much?
Yeah, it is. It's been, so I use my video. I use Touch Designer to like make my video look cool.
Gotcha.
And it uses too much processing power. I need a better computer or another computer to do it. I know.
Hobbies.
I know, too many hobbies.
If only.
But it looks like we're getting live streamed through. Perfect. Okay, cool. For those of you who are on the live stream on Instagram, for those of you on YouTube, this is my friend Joel Reichenbach.
Hey everybody.
Did I pronounce it right? There's so many letters in
There's
there.
so many letters and consonants. I joke all the time that I say it wrong, so I don't expect you to say it right.
Yeah.
So I say Reichenbach. It's
Reichenbach.
it's not phonetically consistent, and
Yeah.
so
It'd be like Reichenbach or something.
or Reichenbach.
Yeah.
And so
Very German.
yeah, so my Ohio Reichenbachs say it like Reichenbach, but if you go west, it's Reichenbach.
Okay.
Which is so.
Yeah.
I just joke. I say it wrong, so you don't have to say it right.
Okay, that's good to know. It's it's not Rick and Morty at least.
It's not, but I wouldn't be opposed.
We do love some Rick and Morty.
Indeed. Indeed.
So to kind of like set up the conversation.
Yeah.
I really, and like for those of you on the live stream, if you have questions, I'll probably see it on YouTube better than I will on Instagram, but I'll try to check Instagram too. Really, I think my goal for this is one, to like give people an understanding on how they can find out what's happening in these bills that are being proposed.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking a little bit ago. We were eating some wontons and drinking some tea.
So tasty.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, but let's eat some food together.
Yeah.
Great idea.
Yeah, I was hungry and I was like, I know I'm just gonna be stressing, being like, oh, when am I gonna eat? So I think for me, my goal is like, how can people be informed? Where are the places that they can go?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of been the model of like what I've been trying to do on like the Tuesday live stream, like going into a bill and looking at it and being like, what does this mean? And throwing it into ChatGPT, and then coming back and then calling legislators and being like, what is going on? I don't like this. Can you change it, please? Thank you. We talked a little bit earlier about how, in my mind, these people are hired by us.
Yeah.
When we elect them, we're choosing them for a job.
Mm-hmm.
And the job is to represent our interests. Like, we're a representative democracy. So we vote for the people that we think represent our views best.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they don't, and sometimes we have to hold them accountable. And, like, how can we do that if we're not able to understand what they're doing?
Mm-hmm.
So you came with a bunch of different, like a spreadsheet with a bunch of different bills.
Yeah.
And there's a more in-depth process that I think like I wasn't even aware of until you kind of talked about it.
Sure.
So could you kind of explain like right now where we are in the legislative session, like what is going on and what does that even mean? And then where are we kind of headed in this? Just kind of like give us some context.
Yeah.
And maybe even like a little intro about yourself.
Sure.
We met at the Apple store.
We did.
And,
We did.
You've gone on your own journey, and so have I.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But our paths haven't stopped crossing since, which is just great.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. So, my name is Joel. I have been in Indy for just over 10 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm from a small farm town in Ohio, Bluffton, Ohio. Shout out to B-Town. And with that, I moved to Indy for love, and that didn't work out very quickly.
That happened to me too.
But in the midst of it, fell in love with Indy so fast.
Yeah.
I've lived in many Midwest cities, and there isn't a city in the Midwest that is like Indy. I call it a big small town. We've got this town can be as small as we want it to be, and we can be as far away from our neighbors as we want to be. And so we have a lot of agency in that. But in the midst of it, Yeah, I've spent the last 10 years or so in working in and around housing, a lot around fundraising.
Yeah.
But in the midst of
Yeah,
that,
didn't you work at where were you at a few years ago?
I was at Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Great organization, working to make home ownership available to folks who that banks can't make money off of.
Yeah.
Who have
Which
stable
there's a lot
income.
of people,
yeah,
you know?
I mean, how many of us? I think that's what, and we're going to get into it. But investors that have come into our neighborhoods are telling us that we need to do more. After we've already invested everything into a system that is upside down to begin with, and even if you haven't done what everybody's said that you need to do, you still have a right to be able to have a warm roof over your head, where you can sleep and invest in yourself and your neighbors.
Yeah, and I think there's a film that we won't get into like a lot of detail in. There's a like YouTube channel called Channel 5 News, and they started this film called Dear Kelly that is about one of the guys who was involved, in the January 6th riots, who is a big patriot, who's like, his name is Kelly J. Patriot, is the name. And in his, in the story and some of the investigative like journalism they do, they find that like 50% of the people who were in the January 6th riot, or at least who got arrested and, all of these things, a lot of them actually had foreclosures. I think 60% of them had bankruptcies. I think that as you age, and one of the kind of ideas that they put inside of this film is like, why do people become radicalized? Like what happens here? And he talks a little bit about how whenever you're young and you experience trauma, a lot of times you turn to crime or drugs or like a little bit more, I don't know, like on the edge of society things. Whereas whenever you are established, you have your whole life, and then it's taken from you and you feel like this is unfair, it's very, very easy to become radicalized. And so I think when we're looking at this in the context of like home ownership, or some of the bills that we'll be looking at are things like about squatters, things about if your landlord doesn't take care of your property properly, doesn't give you like a safe place to live. Some of these bills, I think, will go toward helping society in general. That by making sure that some of those like lower level needs, if you're thinking of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs or whatever,
the foundational needs,
exactly, like sense of belonging, sense of food, shelter, things like that. I think it can lead people to a much safer life and a much safer community around them. Less homelessness if we can actually protect people from predatory ideas and predatory people.
Well, in practice, in a system that is made to value capital, in this case buildings, more than the people that would benefit from them.
Totally.
And what a rent that can be paid as opposed to a life that can be built. So that matters. Yeah,
it does matter. I mean, I feel I look back at my neighbor, Miss Pat, and her experiences of, having a landlord who wasn't taking care of the properties, wasn't giving her a safe place to live in, and she has no recourse, as far as I've found legally, to, withhold rent or, hold the landlord accountable. Like, it's really on the landlord's dime and time, which is a fun rhyme. It's like, it's on the landlord's like time and dime to make this a reality. And so I'm not a big fan of that. I think it's a much better approach if we can have something that like really protects individuals and gives some balance of power in those things. And that's done through legislation. That's done through the laws that we put in place and those kinds of things.
The guardrails that determine the rules of the game.
That's a great way to put it.
And so if the rules of the game are it's the reason why I have run rules in baseball, right? And that once you hit 20-0 in baseball, the game's over. What you've achieved what you're trying to achieve has been achieved.
I was watching I'm gonna turn this off a little bit. I'm getting more. Samson Livingston. I guess there was a team here in Indiana that like they did what happened? They had like won like 100-4 or something like that, and it's like, guys, just don't stop. What are you doing?
I think the question is like, what are we here for? Like, talking about our legislators, are they here to play, and who are they playing the game for? Who are the people in the stands that they're trying to make happy? Who are they playing it for them? Are they playing it for the community, and what does that look like? And based on those rules, and the thing is that at the end of the day, it's almost like sometimes when you think about the judicial system and you hear judicial, you think justice, but if you've ever served on a jury, it's about who played the law best. It's not about right and wrong. It's not about a moral situation. It's about who played the law best. And so I think the question is, if we want to get involved with our legislators, how can we leverage our voices, our community, our power to make sure that it's not about, are you playing legislator? Are you playing the law the best for your top donors? Are you playing the law the best for your stock portfolio? Are you playing the law best for where you want to go in your career? Or are you a true public servant that is looking to do what is best by your constituents and the majority of your constituents in that way? And we can have all kinds of different ideas and differing ideas of what that looks like. But if it's a little too clear, sometimes about what that looks like, or sometimes they don't know. Even your senator, Senator Hunley, on a recent podcast was like, we're not the experts here. We cannot be the experts on the 700, 600, 800 bills that come through. So we need constituents to come and tell us, because their lived experience is going to be different than my lived experience. And so like that matters if we are holding them accountable to play by the rules that are that those guardrails, and working for the guardrails that help us as many of us get down the road, as far down the road as we can.
To create, like, at least for me, like my vision is like a society where when things go wrong or when you don't have support, that there are opportunities to get support and to find stability again. You know, I look at my own life growing up. I grew up, you know, I had free lunches all through school, you know, very low income. My dad was schizophrenic and was only able to do so much to take care of us, and a lot of it relied on me and my brother to kind of like resolve our own needs and find our own help. And then we found the church, and the church really stepped up to help us, which was really awesome. Now, it's because they were, you know, a very wealthy church. They had a lot of money. They had a lot of resources. We lived nearby, which was really convenient, and we weren't afraid to go. You know, we'd had positive experiences because of the relationships that we'd have with other people. My mom brought us to church when we were young, and it was a cool church for kids. So in my mind, it was really nice. And as I've aged, that's changed for me. You know, the stability that was given in an early age, I then found a way to get for myself, from, you know, working a job to, you know, now pursuing like art and music as a career. I think there's a lot of like empowerment that comes through giving people the freedom to actually like have a life. But I think we could wax on about this forever.
We could, absolutely.
Let's look at some actual, like, these bills and these laws.
And before we jump into that,
let me make sure we're still
going.
Are we live? Is it working? Okay,
it's going.
Cool. It looks like it's working.
Yeah.
We might be dropping frames nonstop. We might have terrible internet. I'm gonna open this door a little bit more. I've noticed.
Do it. I saw you said that.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Let the Wi-Fi in.
I know. Come on, Wi-Fi's. Anyway, if it's too bad, I'm sorry, and we'll redo this. And I'll probably just put this YouTube, Instagram thing on there. Cool.
But yeah, I think if we're going to talk about the bills, your last live stream, which if folks haven't seen it, should jump back in, because you went through what it looks like to find a bill, see who wrote the bill, and then also to see the committee that will be hearing that bill and who to contact and how to find their contact information.
Yeah, totally.
So following up on that, watch that video. But in addition to that, we're in the midst of hundreds and hundreds of bills getting getting submitted, the deadline was a week or so ago.
Okay.
So all the bills, the deluge, they're there.
Yeah.
And
so when you submit, just to like clarify,
Yeah.
so if I'm a legislator and I have a bill
Man,
during the summer,
that sounds great. Eye health is important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we say like, hey, as part of your insurance, you get free sunglasses. We're going to pass that bill. And then we would then have to put that all together into some fancy legal text.
Sometimes.
Yeah, maybe.
If we want it to pass and go far.
Yeah. And so then I would send that over to, whoever is in charge of these bills. I don't know what that is.
You'd submit it to, and I'm not a legislator.
And
I
that's
haven't
okay.
done, but you.
I don't think the details are as important.
You would submit that, and then the leader of that chamber will choose to assign it to a committee or not.
So either the House or the Senate. Okay, cool.
And so once the leader of that chamber is like, okay, like this will make it to the next step, and that's when it gets assigned to, say for the House, Todd Houston would say this will be assigned to the Senate Judiciary Committee, or there's an immigration bill that's going to be on public safety and veterans affairs. Will be in that committee that's coming up.
So then basically, like a committee is a kind of small team of legislators who are, asking questions about the bill, investigating it, making revisions.
Yeah, there will be options for amendments, and also the opportunity to hear testimony. And so there is a lot of stuff early on and in these first few weeks that gets a lot of attention. That deserves a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And so that matters sometimes whether something gets even sent to a committee. And so once it's in a committee, then that committee chair can choose to hear it or not. So that committee chair has a lot of power as well.
Okay. So like the one that I talked about on the live stream was HB 1136. So the Education Committee is going to receive that. Let's say, they receive that, and then they could say, I got a call from this guy Fred, and he didn't like the bill.
Yeah.
He seems like a nice guy. We're not going to hear it.
Yeah.
And so then it dies.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's done. It's over.
Okay, cool. So like early in the process, there is some empowerment for individuals calling, voicing their opinions, posting on social media to like basically get a ground support to say, don't assign this to a committee, and if you do assign it to a committee, don't even hear it.
Yeah. Now there are some tricky things that happen, and I want to be clear that like for the escrow bill that I have on the list here, there are 3 versions of that escrow bill. Okay. 2 in the Senate and 1 in the House that I'm aware of right now. Usually one will make it if it's got traction. Okay. But this is kind of so like if this committee in the Senate doesn't hear it, then it could be heard in the House.
Okay. So there's some political strategizing on getting these things through if there's will in the party to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and so everybody's talking to each other. At least if they want to get stuff accomplished, they're talking to each other, and they're not just blowing smoke. And so in the midst of that, it's important too, and we were talking about this earlier a bit as well. I think for me, when something comes to hits us close to home and that we care about, to find the experts in the area to act does matter. And so for me, I've got 3 main organizations. I caught the housing bug with Habitat for Humanity. After Habitat for Humanity, I went on to work for a domestic violence shelter, seeing just how much the access to affordable housing affected whether people stay in unsafe and deadly situations or not.
I mean, that was my own like childhood upbringing.
Absolutely.
Like it's kind of a crazy story, but my parents had a fight one night, and this has been happening since I was a kid. There was a lot of fighting and calling the police, and one time my dad came home with a gun, and my mom ended up calling the police, and the police showed up at the same time as my dad and took that gun that he had stolen from somebody, confiscated that, and he admitted that what he was trying to do and planning to do was to kill our family. And my mom, that was the line for her. That was, no, I have to get out of this. This is not okay. And it's like, that is a really far line to be crossing where, you know, the police have been called multiple times by your child, where you've been hit, abused, raped, you know, all of those things.
Yeah.
Like, I think for me, when I look at some of the legislation around abortion and those types of care, like when you are in an abusive relationship and you know, become pregnant, it a lot of times like escalates some of those problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or makes it harder to leave. And so, you know, having good legislation, having good access to these like resources is not like a good idea. It's about making sure that, you know, kids like me don't have to experience those things. Don't have to pay as much for therapy as I get older, you know. It's expensive to do that. But also that like families are able to stay together long term. You know, even if it's not that specific, you know, biological family unit, but that someone can go and get the help that they need. Someone can get safe while that person's getting help, and maybe find some way to like reconcile some of those problems, or find a path forward with a different family. I think there's a lot that's involved in that goes, especially if you've had like a really positive upbringing, really safe upbringing, you might not see, might not understand.
And the experience that people have is far more common than those that haven't seen or experienced it themselves.
What is it? 2 out of 3 women have experienced some form of domestic violence.
I think it's near that, and 1 in 4 men as well.
I'm one of those.
And the way that we can destigmatize, believe survivors, believe people when they tell us their stories. Whether that has to do with people being in unsafe or unstable situations. The opportunity that we have to empower Hoosier families and empower Hoosiers to be everything that they really can be. And to how do we eliminate as many of those roadblocks so that we can continue to invest in our communities through art and expression and like doing real hard data and science and like do the innovation that we know that has always been here in Indiana, right? And right now we have too many Hoosiers that are trying to put food on the table and try to be in a safe place, and that's where their energy is going. Figuring out how to the next medical bill that's going to come, instead of focusing on the opportunity to support their kid.
Totally.
Or the opportunity to support their community in like knocking it out of the park in whatever really weird and cool and essential Indiana industry that I don't understand that is bubbling up. You know, so many people tell me what they're doing, and I'm just like, I don't understand the words that are coming out of your mouth, but you just told me the impact that you're making, and that's freaking great. I want them to focus on that, not. I want them to be able to go to the grocery and get everything that they need for their table. And so like how do we do that, and how do we make sure that those guardrails are empowering that? And so all that to say, the opportunities for us to voice and tell our stories, which are our stories to give. I do want to take a moment and say thank you for sharing your story. Like you and your family didn't deserve that.
No, I agree.
And when we do choose and have the opportunity or in a place that we can share those stories, it gives the opportunity as an expert in that experience to inform a legislator who might not have that experience. And you did that for your public school experience in your video, in like your story here, and our stories matter, and how we connect those and harness those when we can. Nobody deserves our story. That's ours to freely give.
That's a great perspective. Thank you.
But
anyway.
Sorry.
No, you're good, man. I shared that. I mean, very like. I think this has been one of the reasons why I wanted to do more live streams. Is like I feel like I have a lot of really great conversations with friends, and I feel like I have a lot of things that are on my mind. That sitting down and doing a video on the internet is a lot harder, you know? Whereas like coming in, let me make sure I'm on Do Not Disturb just so I don't get a bunch of random text messages from people. But, you know, being able to share those things and like be honest about it is really important. Like for me personally, like I want people to understand that just because your life looks good now doesn't mean that it wasn't bad at some point. And that you haven't, you know, grown and found a way forward through that. At you know, because of the love and attention or, you know, care, because of someone giving something at some point. And I think we can decide to make it easier for people who want to do that. we can make harder.
Mm-hmm.
And I look back at, if there were laws about feeding the homeless, then that might make it harder for us to get food. Whenever we may not have been homeless, we may have been grouped in with that because we're, two kids on the street who are walking up to a place where there's food.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, we didn't have dinner the last 2 nights, and we had school breakfast or lunch, or the bus was late, so I didn't get breakfast. Like it becomes more important, and a lot of times the nuances are overlooked whenever we create laws that, try to hedge people's behaviors in the things that they're like passionate about doing. So yeah.
And so like how we use our voices at any point in the process of a bill, the going back to Schoolhouse Rock, right? But the way that when something is in a committee, it can get scheduled for a hearing. And so in that hearing is when they are talking about the merits of a bill, asking questions of the author. So if the author isn't on that committee, that author will often testify. But then you can also sign up to testify in support or in opposition of a bill. Anybody can. The tricky thing is that sometimes when they schedule a hearing, they'll move it on you the day before, or they'll change it 3 times, so you just wasted your 3 PTO days. Because you got there early, you went through security, and there are pieces of the puzzle sometimes that are really frustrating because the way that this happens isn't actually built for residents and constituents to participate. It's built for them to write the laws, pass them, and move on. So that's a really frustrating piece about that. But if you have the opportunity and you take those steps, that is another thing on top of calling, on top of writing, to be able to testify. And that sounds super like official and important. You go, you fill out a little slip of paper, and then they'll read your name, and you go and talk, and they might ask you a question or two. They're really respectful, and then you go and sit down. But
I saw that a lot with like some of the abortion ban bills and things like that were happening.
And the Blue Line last year.
Last year. Okay, cool. So that's like. So we kind of got, just to summarize. Oh, I think my phone died. Well, it's because I ran out of battery. Oh my gosh. Hold on 1 second. And we back. Well, I hope people got to the stream. Let me put this off low power mode and put the brightness down. Okay. Sorry, everybody. We're the worst. We're the worst live streamers on the internet. But it's still on YouTube, which
We're still here.
And hopefully the internet's not terrible. Okay, cool. Okay. Let me see. What am I thinking of? Okay, so to kind of summarize where we've been, and then let's actually jump into these bills and talk about them. We were talking about some of the process. So at the very beginning, they have to submit these bills. Legislators submit these bills. They go, oh yeah, that's a good bill. That's a bad bill. We want to change it. We want to do whatever. So they go through and like decide if they're going to hear that. So then the leader of the House or the leader of the Senate assigns that to a committee. And each of these steps in the process, there is some amount of time for us to give feedback, whether that's on social media, whether that's emailing our legislators, emailing the head of the House and the head of the Senate, and saying, hey, I don't like this, shoot them an email, things like that, calling, whatever. From there, it then gets assigned to a committee. And there's a couple of different processes that may happen. So whether it's you bugging them on their time off, shooting them an email, calling them, find out where they go to coffee and letting them know that you don't like their bill. Like there's a lot of different little steps in that process, as well as potentially some hearings where they'll actually ask for comment, and those might get changed, and those might get moved around, and there might be problems. So there's a lot of like little bitty, crazy little details in here and different ways that you can actually share your voice and share your opinions. But I think one of the things you kind of pointed out is like finding those experts and finding those personal stories that connect with the specific topics of the bill. And that's what we were doing on the live stream before, is like going in and trying to understand why these things were important.
Yeah.
You know, why I am calling you today, why I'm using my time
Right.
to make sure that you know my opinion, is that it's that important to me.
Yeah.
And that may have an influence, good or bad, or maybe nothing.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they just hang it up and don't answer. That's fine.
I joke all the time, we don't know until we try.
Yes.
And when we find our experts and the people who this is their day job.
Yeah.
When we are talking to our teachers, when we're talking about that, when we're talking to, and we pay attention to what our school board is moving towards and things like this. Yeah. If education is important to us. Yeah. Or if it's one of our top things, education is important to all of us. It affects us all. Yeah. But if it's something that that we're really moved and committed to, but like when we find those experts, then we can support their success, and we can also be a part of the success of students, of renters, of homeowners, of neighbors, of
just making our community better.
Yeah,
at the end of the day, like I think a lot of us want to live in a community that feels safe, that feels like we have, you know, kind of freedoms to move about and do the things that we want to do, and that we're not, I don't know, that we're not always looking over our shoulder to make sure that no one's coming to get us, or you know, those
literally
kinds of
or metaphorically.
Yeah. Also, if you're on Instagram, youtube.com/@mffred. My phone is on low power mode, and I don't. Is this backwards? Will you all tell me if this is backwards? I still don't know. No one's commented. It looks good on my screen, but it might be backwards.
I can check. This is when you got two
Let's
people
check
on
it.
the,
Oh, this is
you got
great.
2 people on the stream.
Because I know how to write backwards. My mom taught me.
Here we go. Now that's something special.
I know. I actually have it written backwards.
You're my first. It is backwards.
Oh my gosh.
It is backwards.
Okay, we're writing this backwards. 1 second. Where's my pen?
Oh gosh.
Okay. And then we're going to get into these bills. If you want to see the screen share. Thanks, Spencer. Okay, well, real quick. YouTube. The hard part is what way the B goes.
I am so impressed with you right now.
It's easy when you have it above and you're just looking at it.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
You're kind of doing
my slash is wrong, you know what I mean? It's like, and then it's oh, this is the hard part. At oh my gosh. At MF Fred. Oh my gosh, I should have used a smaller pen. We're going off the page.
It's Mulaney's bit about doing a happy birthday sign. A big ass.
Okay. At MF Fred, youtube.com/@MFFred. Sorry, it looks like trash. It looks so stupid. It was the right way on YouTube. Okay, great. Thank you, Riley. It looks a lot better now on Instagram. So if you want to see it, my dyslexic self is super impressed. My mom taught me this, and I wanted to impress my mom when I was a kid, so I learned how to do it.
You succeeded. I am impressed.
It doesn't look bad. The slash is the wrong way.
Oh, gosh.
At MF Fred.
Yeah.
John Mulaney shout out. Hell yeah. Okay, let's screen share and let's dive into this.
I do want to. Some of this is my. So like that eviction expungement or that A1 cell. There's a. That's not how. There's an F in there.
Yeah,
I
also misspelled your name.
There's no F in there, and so I put this together. The reason this is put together put together so quickly is because so many bills haven't been assigned to a committee yet, and so there are a lot of bills that aren't going to make it to committee.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the experts that I follow haven't put out their watch lists yet.
Okay. Like the FBI. They have a watch list, and so do experts.
Yes, and so do experts in terms of bills and everything else.
Not people.
I hope that I am not anywhere near an FBI watch list, but I don't get to determine that. I guess.
I know. I mean, you'd be among some good and some bad. Martin Luther King was on a watch list.
Yes, he was.
So, as long as it's for the right reason.
Yeah. But these are housing is something that is really close to my heart. I caught the housing bug at Habitat, but I also, like, when I moved to Indy, I was working for the largest company in the world, had a bachelor's degree, and was at a place where for a few months I didn't know where my head was going to rest.
Yeah.
And so in the midst of me following the system, I'm in tears trying to figure out, where am I going to go? Where's my stuff going to go? What's this going to look like as a 24-year-old?
I get that. When I moved to Indy at 19, it was 2008, 2009, beginning of 2009, winter. And the economy had just crashed.
Yeah.
And I was working at Apple in Louisville at the time and had a transfer approved until it wasn't.
Yeah.
And so I was supposed to have a job when I moved here. I had a lease. I'd signed everything. Yeah. And they said, can we get that first pay stub? And I said, well, I lost my job. And so they said, you need to have a pay stub. You need to have a job to have this apartment. We'll hold it for you, but we're not going to hold it for very long. Yeah. So they gave me a couple weeks to get a job until I could prove that I had a job. So I slept on couches and slept in my car a couple times and just found a way to make it work. Yeah. And that thankfully quickly got resolved. I got a job, you know, making $10 an hour, working as a web designer / manufacturer of shelving, which is funny. And then I got laid off by them 6 months later and got a job at Apple, thank goodness. And, you know, whatever, it worked out. But it sucks. It sucks being homeless. Yeah. Yeah. And even if it doesn't last for long, it still sucks. Still makes an impact on you. Yeah.
And that's one of the things, like, just going in with this first bill here, the Senate Bill 142 would actually make the process to get if a eviction was filed, even if it was never carried out, that sticks with your record.
Oh, really?
Yes. And
so like, let's say there's just a misunderstanding.
Yep.
Like
You're toast. See you later.
My landlord may have changed the account that I deposit or where I take the check, and they didn't see it, or it got lost or whatever, and I may be like, well, I wrote the check. I got proof I wrote the check. I dropped it off. I have a video. I dropped it off, and they said, well, we filed this, and we're not going to evict you. It's fine. You're good. But then I go and look for a new place. Yeah. Let's say I'm making even more money and I'm doing really well. Yeah. And they do a background check on me. Yeah. They could see that I didn't get evicted.
Absolutely.
But they filed an eviction.
They can see that you're a little scary. Oh. They can see you're a little unstable. They can see that, that landlord, I didn't know them. Yeah. Saw at some point in time that you might not be a good tenant anymore.
Ooh.
And so eviction is this is a whole nother thing. Read Evicted, the book Evicted by Matthew Desmond. Read anything by Matthew Desmond.
Let me write a little note on my little iPad here so you can see it.
The epilogue to the book Evicted is worth buying the book or borrowing from the library and just read the epilogue if that's all you have time for.
Okay, epilogue. I know sometimes I will pick up the epilogue of a book just to get the summary if I want to read it. Sometimes book starts out a little bit booky.
Oh, yeah.
My ADHD
Absolutely.
Gets in the way.
And, the beautiful part about a book is that, like, many books could be... who was it? Was it Sam Bankman-Fried said that, like, a book could be so many books could be blog posts or something, but in the midst of it, like, the beauty of friendship is that, I get who you are, Fred. You know what? I want to sit with you. Yeah. And so, like, sitting with and actually being able to digest and, like, absorb material matters.
Yeah, totally. And I think it makes an impact on you in a more, like, intentional way by having to go through each of the pages and read each of the things. And sometimes it's to reread them. Yeah. At least for me, I a lot of times get to the bottom of the page and go, I've read 4 pages and didn't read anything.
Fred, you and I are the same. The
hack,
if you have ADHD, if you can time your library thing with the audiobook and the physical and the actual book,
that's a pro tip.
Keeps my brain on track and I don't fall off of it so quickly.
That's great.
So anywho, the eviction bill will make it far. It makes the roadmap towards getting those evictions sealed or expunged far easier.
So that means they won't show up on your background checks, or won't show up on...
Once it's sealed or expunged, then it is something that can't be used against you in those scenarios. So a certain amount of time has to pass and all of these different kinds of things, but it's something that somebody who has an eviction notice needs to pursue. Yeah. And so that's why legal aid, like the different legal clinics, the Neighborhood Christian Legal Clinic, Legal Services of Indiana, places like that. The Fair Housing Center of Central Indiana so many resources, but that are still far more limited than they should be, can get information, helps, and this bill is going to make that a lot easier for people who have either been evicted or who have had eviction formally threatened upon them.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense. Yeah. And so I'm going to plug in my phone because we do have a few people on the Instagram Live.
Do it.
Also, if you're on Instagram Live, @MFFred on YouTube. YouTube.com/@MFFred. I think I got a little plug over here. You can see my butt, which is fun.
In the workshop.
Still have one of those. Haven't lost it yet.
It's like Santa's workshop.
It is like Santa's workshop. There's a bunch of fun lights. We love lights.
A Nerf gun?
We have a Nerf gun over there. It's actually a generic version of a Nerf gun.
Great.
It's like a Snurf gun or something. An X-Shot, a Zuru X-Shot. So four shot, Sorry if I scared anybody there. And we're just going to like totally mess up this charger because it's an Apple charger. And they are trust.
Here, would this be helpful on that?
Ooh, what is this?
Just a little MagSafe wallet thing.
Oh my goodness, look at this thing.
Would that give you any...
it's not going to give me much, but hey, you know what? I'll put it on this. This is great. Oh.
Once
there we go.
Once a techie gadget guy. Yeah, maybe that's making it worse. I don't know. I'm sorry.
I don't know. I think it made it worse.
Yeah,
that's okay. That's okay. We're just gonna throw this up here.
We're just Blair Witch styling it here.
Welcome to the live stream. We're on YouTube.
Punk rock.
YouTube.com/@MFFred. I wrote that backwards and forwards. So you should be proud of me.
I am.
Also, you're not totally in this frame, and neither am I. That's okay.
We'll get cozy.
Anyway, okay, so kind of looking at this on the screen share here, eviction expungement.
Yes.
SB 0142. So you have a link here that I've never heard of, Legiscan.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna click on that and see what's going on with Legiscan. Okay, this is kind of cool. So you get like the status. It was introduced, 25% progress, committee report, amend, do pass, adopted. What does this mean?
So that part specifically, and there's so many different pieces, and I'm still figuring it all out.
And maybe it's not that important for us to know at this moment.
At this moment, that means that, so like the 25% progression means that it's been assigned to a committee, so the committee report, and that I think that it has been assigned for a hearing.
Okay.
And either they've like there are different readings and different pieces there, but once we're in the process where it's at the committee, is that like it's been picked up. The 25% there progression means it's been picked up. It's got traction. Okay, is what we know now.
So if it was 0%, it's basically like it's probably not going to be a bill that we're
at this point in time about. Everything, I think the deadlines have passed for committee at this point in time. Okay. So if it's not at a committee, and I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but we're close to that point. Yeah. Where if it's not, things are starting to get assigned right now. And then if once the deadline to be assigned to a committee means that all the bills that are assigned those are the only bills that have traction to move forward.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. And then this gives us a summary. Obviously, eviction issues provides that the court shall order an expungement in a qualifying eviction case automatically. So that means that it would happen immediately. Like, hey, under current law, the tenant is required to request the expungement. Right. So if you're a person who's not good at, filing paperwork.
I don't know somebody who is when it comes to the governmental process. Yes. Like, everything makes sense for the people behind the desk, and none of it makes sense for the people on the other side.
So if you're not a lawyer, it's going to be hard for you to get rid of your expungement, or if you don't hire a lawyer to do the right things.
And that's not the fault for the people behind the desk. For all my government workers out there,
they're probably too busy. They don't follow me. But a money permits expungement in an eviction case if a money judgment related. So these are the details of this case.
Of this bill,
of this bill. That's that case. This bill. So we go down, and this I might start using this as something that I can start looking at. We can see who the sponsors are: Elizabeth Brown, Greg Taylor, Mike Bohacek, and Lonnie Randolph. So we've got 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. So it seems like it's a bill that's like pretty popular in some way among, or bipartisan, that goes with both of the 2 parties in the 2-party system that we have. We'll talk about that one another day. And then some notes on this.
Yeah, so that's the progress that we can see here.
Okay, cool.
So you can see at the beginning, so it moved we've got the different authors that, and so moving up, co-sponsors and everything. So here you can see that what you have
referred to Committee on Judiciary.
So that got sent to the Judiciary Committee, and now the committee is going to hear it.
Okay, cool. And then we've also got like some different amendments and extra things here.
Yeah.
So if you're like a little wonky, you like to get into the details. You can go here and dig in. So let's say this is like really important to you. Maybe you've experienced an eviction. You couldn't figure out how to file the expungement, and then whenever you tried to get a house, maybe there was like certain. And I'm even thinking back to whenever I purchased this home, I wasn't making as much money as I did towards the end of owning this home. Well, I guess I was making more money than I do now. But at the time, like if I had an eviction, there was a certain tax credit that we were able to get where we didn't have to have as large something. I don't know if it's a tax credit or what it was, but it gave us the ability to have this home and live here and buy it without needing to save up more. But there were some requirements on, have you ever been evicted? Have you ever been convicted of a felony? We couldn't have received that like benefit and would have had to spend more money and would have not been able to purchase this house when it was purchased.
Yeah, and I don't know all those different technicalities, what qualifies or not for different loans, but the having that eviction, it's almost like a credit score or a social security number being utilized where it wasn't like evictions are supposed to be there to let future landlords and lenders know to express caution. The problem is that evictions are used as a tool to intimidate, in addition to as a tool to protect someone's building that they're trying if you believe in good landlords, that they're trying to provide housing.
Assuming positive intent.
Assuming positive intent.
We can say if you're a good landlord, you want to know if somebody is going to not pay their bill on time, and that might be a good thing for someone's record to show.
Absolutely.
They have been evicted a bunch of times, and here are the details of those evictions. But in this case, this would say, look, if you got evicted and you've basically, so in this case it says, number 1, a money judgment related to the eviction action is entered by the court against the tenant, and the tenant has satisfied the money judgment. So in my little understanding, I would say, let's say you're my landlord and you say, hey, I owe you Fred owes me $800. And I say, okay, cool. You evicted me. I paid you the $800, and we're good.
I gave notice of eviction.
Yes.
You paid the $800.
Okay.
And now we're square.
Okay, so you haven't evicted me yet. You just gave me a notice.
Which is what gets put on your record.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So I didn't even get evicted. You just said, hey, buddy, you owe me $800, and I'm going to file this thing. You better give me my dang $800. And I said, oh, man, sorry, my bad. ADHD, here's your $800.
Sure. Yeah.
Then I go to get my next apartment. I might not get it.
Right. If you hadn't already started the process of expunging your eviction. Yeah. Okay.
And then the next one is there's not a money judgment, but at least 7 years have elapsed since the entry of the judgment. So like I'm 19.
It's like bankruptcy.
Yeah.
In that situation.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. And I'm not a lawyer. I want to be clear.
Yes. Yeah. I'm not either.
Yeah. So, but just as these are being discussed here, this is why we have the experts to follow as well. But in layman's terms, that's the gist of what we're looking at here. So we're not sitting here saying that people who are signing up to pay their rent and aren't paying it, or people who are which we should have compassion in those situations, but it's difficult to run a business that way. And two things
balancing both things.
Two things can be true in that situation, and so the question is like, how do we make sure that evictions are telling the right story?
And they're telling the truth about a person, not just trying to manipulate the system to do whatever, put people in a place where they are homeless for the rest of their lives.
And Indiana and Indianapolis specifically, has the second largest number of evictions
Wow.
in the country.
Wow.
That's not per capita.
Really?
We
Just
evict,
like number.
we evict more people in Indianapolis than Chicago,
Really?
than Los Angeles, than Seattle, than Houston.
That's crazy. Because, like, I mean, what is the population size? We're about 1 million people in Indianapolis?
For Indianapolis proper, our
Yes.
metro area is about 2. So
Yeah,
if we include the donuts, but
Okay.
yeah, so we're just under 1 million.
Oh my gosh, and we still get more people. So per capita would be crazy per 100,000 people.
Yeah, if I'm being snarky, the building downtown that says Indiana, a state that works, I often ask that works for who?
For whomst?
And so
the screen share.
we are people drool over Indiana for housing investment
because
we are sold to the world as come and buy our homes because you will be able to pretty much do what you want.
Yeah. Like that's
hyperbolic.
That's a bummer though.
But I would challenge you to spot the hole.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah.
Thanks for pointing this out. So like in my mind, kind of like moving this on to like what we would do, and we'll look at a couple of these other bills, but I wanted to use this like first one as a good example here. And also if you're joining youtube.com/AdamSFred, I wrote that backwards. Anyway, so if I wanted to let Senator Elizabeth Brown know, let's click on this and see what happens.
So in this situation for Legiscan, there are 2 websites I use the most. One is the General Assembly website, iga.in.gov, and Legiscan. Those 2 will give me most of the information that I need.
So Legiscan.
And I don't know if we're going to get to it tonight, but you can actually create your own tracking list if you create a login.
Okay.
And then you can even categorize those. Oh. So for me, I have a housing section. I have a...
and that's on Legiscan, right?
Yeah, on Legiscan. Cool. So I can get all these briefs. You can even see like all the different amendments and everything that come through. But it will even email you every Monday, let you know if any bills have moved. And so Legiscan's a really great tool, and it's free for most of its features. So everything that I just named is a free feature of Legiscan.
That's awesome. So like here, this is iga.in.gov, Indiana General Assembly. There's a phone number here that we can use to call Senator Liz Brown. It was Elizabeth Brown on the other page. and a lot of similar things that we saw on Legiscan here. Some of when we click on their name, I don't know what gender they prefer, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We click on their name, we can see bills, resolutions, all kinds of different stuff that they've done, that they're doing, and we can call them. Yeah. We can shoot them a phone call, and I found, and I gotta look up the format, but there is a similar format for sending an email here. I believe it is like because this person is a senator and they are in District 15. I believe it is S15 at iga.in.gov. So it would be S for senator, number 15 for what district they're in, and then at that email.
I do believe.
Okay, cool. And then I believe for house it was H15 or whatever.
Yeah.
Now that might be different. Maybe they have a better email address. Who knows? We all have a couple emails, right?
They have different phone numbers too. The important thing is doing it.
Yes.
And it will get to them, and
I mean, you can tag them on Instagram. You know what I'm saying? Like,
and these are great opportunities when we think.
Right here.
Yeah, when we think about the diversity of thought at the State House. Yeah. That whether it's going to be difficult to find a legislator that ticks all your all the boxes that are important to you.
Yeah, of course.
And so
there's not a lot of long-haired music playing.
Which there should be
weird
more.
Quantum
There
cavern
should
art.
be more. I would love to see somebody's office have
looking like
a
this.
quantum cavern installation.
I mean, if you are a legislator right now and you want a quantum cavern art installation, or if you're on the live stream and you want to see the actual screen, youtube.com/@mffred.
But
yes,
this is an
me up.
opportunity too. If Elizabeth might be on different sides of different bills, to show some appreciation, have an opportunity to state, this is where we are on the same page. The organization I work very closely with, and I've worked very closely with promoting bills that Senator Mike Kreider has authored, has co-sponsored. He is a retired law enforcement officer who he was the person who did SB 1 in 2022 for the mental health expansion.
Oh yeah, that's great.
That is helping to fund Marion County's 24-hour expansion of our our clinician-led crisis response team, where people get professional mental health people when they're available for mental health crises instead of police. But like in the midst of
that's like it's huge. From my own experience of my dad, there were a lot of times that my dad, he was in his 50s when he passed away, 54. He was schizophrenic and medicated, but he loved to go on walks. He also had seizures. And so he may be on, and one time he was actually on a walk, just like on the canal, had a seizure and fell down, and somebody found him, and because of the seizure, he wasn't fully coherent. And a police officer showed up. And thankfully, on his background of his phone, it said, in case of an emergency, call this person. I am schizophrenic, and like my son can help me. And so they called me, and I was at the Apple store, and I left. I got a point from our old manager, which is crazy. But I got a point for leaving in the middle of the day. Got down there, and thankfully the police had seen that, had resolved those issues with us, rather than saying, this guy's clearly drunk, or this guy's on some drugs, and threw him up. They
didn't see him in the state that he was as a threat, but they were able to respond to him in an appropriate way by happenstance.
Exactly.
Our law enforcement officers aren't trained to respond to the nuances of the human experience. They are trained to
well, and I think part of it
to
is
do what they think is going to keep people safe and keep themselves safe, which
and my dad didn't look threatening. You know what I mean? Like he had been hit by a vehicle, his walk wasn't as good, he was pretty frail looking for a guy in his 50s. And so because they got lucky and saw a man who looked like he was a much older and much more frail than he really was. If he was in his 30s and schizophrenic and had the same situation, looked like me and popped up and was screaming and saying stuff and talking to himself, could easily have been tased, been arrested, believe that he's on some kind of drug, especially right now with fentanyl and those experiences that people are having on those drugs. Like, it could have gone a lot worse for him than it did. And I think, I don't know, just like knowing that there are people on both sides of the aisle who really care and probably have their own experiences around mental health, whether it's family or people that they care about, especially if you've been, if you've been in any kind of like law enforcement or in the military, you see it happen a little bit more frequently than, maybe out and about if you're working at like a Starbucks,
But all that to say,
that's great to know. Like calling and actually saying something positive and saying like, thank you so much for sponsoring this bill. And even sharing, and we talked a little bit about this. My next time, I'd like to go through and kind of look at some of these bills that we talk about and say like, hey, I may be against you on the political spectrum, but I very much support this bill. And if you need a name to add to it, here's Fred the Democrat, who, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are the opportunities that we have to really be able to continue to see like our paths can weave in and out, and that complexity can be really difficult when people are legislating away our safety and legislating away the opportunity for people to thrive in our our communities, in our families, even maybe ourselves. And so that's not something for everyone, but at the same time, if we have the opportunity, and that is something that you're able to do. So like Elizabeth, she's one of the authors of this bill, and even the video last week, you talked about what it looked like to go to the committee now and call the people on the committee, especially if your legislators on the committee. So it's really helpful to know who your legislators are, but then also to know what committees they're on. Because you had last week, somebody asked, hey, are you a constituent? Yeah. And you responded perfectly, like, no, but this legislation will affect me if it goes into law. And so both voices matter. Yeah. Constituents tend to carry a little bit more weight.
Of course,
And so
because they're the people who elected you.
Exactly.
And if you do a good job for them, you might get elected again. Or if you make them mad, you might not, you know?
Yeah. And so calling Elizabeth in to say, I'm really grateful that you've authored this bill. I'd love to see how you continue to go in this direction to support my neighbors or myself or somebody that I know in this way. Because the truth is that while Indianapolis is the second largest evictor in the United States, eviction just isn't a city issue. And so while a lot of Indianapolis or Indiana is not a city, not in an urban or densely populated area, the affordable housing crisis and the tools used to extract stuff from us are still wielded all throughout Indiana. And so the opportunity, whether they're from where people think, oh, people rent in Indianapolis, people rent in West Lafayette, people rent in Fort Wayne, and people rent in Kokomo, and people rent in
Floyd Knob, Indiana.
in Floyd Knob, and in LaGrange County, and just all over the place, because we can't, even in our rural areas, we can't afford homes. And so in the midst of that, the opportunity to affirm where we are together, but then also being able to offer dissent when we disagree, and then when we can be like, hey, weren't you the person that was with me that I am. And at the same time, this is what confuses me about where you're heading in this direction, and then we can have a conversation sometimes.
And even if it's a one-sided conversation, I think it's valuable to send in an email some context of like, hey, I noticed that you were a sponsor of SB 0142. I called you or sent you an email last year, expressing my own, gratitude and my appreciation for you sponsoring this bill.
Absolutely.
You're also the sponsor of this bill, or maybe the author of this bill, whatever. And I don't think that bill aligns with the values that you yourself have espoused, that you put in something like SB 0142, that I am now telling you that bums me out. And I wish that you would change that. And I think that you can make a suggestion. You could do whatever. You could say it. You could just tell them I'm bummed. You know what I'm saying? But I think whenever you realize that these are just people, this is nobody special, it's just, these are just human beings who live in a community, maybe have a different experience or different background. Maybe they are the most evil person in the whole wide world. Who has any idea? I think you seeing them as a person, not as some big entity that you can't stand up and speak against, is really important.
And again, if you have that, I do want to stress that if you have that ability to do so,
of course, this isn't a thing this isn't for everybody to go on. And also, if you just joined and you want to see what we're looking at, youtube.com/@mffred. It's backwards and forwards, so you can read it both ways. There's a live stream that's actually sharing the screen of what we're talking about. That's something I feel like particularly enabled to do. I'm an extrovert. I like talking. I like being on live stream and doing all this stuff. So for me, I think that this is, I don't know, I think this is really valuable for you to point out that this isn't for everybody.
And I think at the same time, so often when the state session comes around, there are so many people whose job is to survive, and isn't their job in this moment to be the center or to do what might be put them in an unsafe situation.
Totally.
And so that is where we have the opportunity for those that can, for those of us that can, that we get to have the opportunity to stand up with and for those that matter to us so much.
Yeah, and I think those stories are important.
Yeah.
That, like, even, you know, for somebody like my girlfriend's much more introverted than I am.
Yeah.
You'll probably see her as we leave, but, you know, you haven't even seen her coming in. Yeah. She's doing her work, she's doing her thing. Yeah. She likes to have her own space and her own time, but she really likes to write down and explain these things and for her own story and for her own purpose, may share those things publicly or privately with people.
Yeah.
And those stories then can go to somebody who does want to stand up and does want to have, you know, some sort of impact and say, you know, one of my friends shared this story with me, or, I think that this is a person you should talk to privately to really understand the nuances of this. Like, I think by being connected in a community and having a vision for this, like, people who are too loud and talk too much at parties, like you and I, can bring together, like, the people who are going to lurk on the internet and maybe want to write an email.
Absolutely.
Or, you know, whatever they want to do. Or tell their friends about it. And tell their other friend who's a little too loud to go and on the internet.
Well, I think that, like, even as you and I have talked about this, it's about, in the conversations we've had, it's about how are we as a community empowered? Yeah. Do we have the power to do what's in our lane to make a difference? And if the world was full of only Joels and Freds,
oh, it'd suck, man.
It would be the worst.
We'd all be just talking at each other.
It would be the worst. There wouldn't be any oxygen left. And
we'd run out so fast.
We would. And so in the midst of that, while you and I share a lot of affinity together, both personality and some experiences, everybody has something to bring to their community. And everything is political. Yeah. And so whether that's what you work on yourself to reflect, how you choose to the art that you produce, the way that you respond in a tense moment, because you've thought about it and you know how you can respond or how you can't in that moment. Yeah. Each step that we take. I think for me, I always ask, what's the next best step? Yeah. Please don't just iterate what other people have done, but I need Fred to be Fred. Yeah. Because that's how this world is the best that it can be. Totally. And when each of us can develop a vision of, like, what does it look like for me to be me and what can I bring to this, not just what Fred or Joel or others are, we're a stronger community because of it. Yeah. So I love that. Yeah, but with that on legislation. Yes. That can, like, sometimes just like, well, you got to call people. And it's like, yeah, you can. And trick is call after hours. It counts the same. If it freaks you out, you can leave a voicemail. Yeah, you can leave a voicemail. I left a couple of voicemails. Or you can write. If you want to see the live stream, I'm just gonna put this up here. Yeah. Or you can, if you find an expert, like, how do you support those experts in that as well? How do you support the teachers union, right? Yeah. How do you support your the school counselor? Like, you might just be like, know a friend who's a teacher, and they might be speaking up on it, and you make them dinner. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I think this is it's more beautiful in my mind to think about, like, the multi-layers of support and all the different ways that you can do this, rather than focusing on, like, it's got to be calling, it's got to be emailing or whatever. Yeah. I think when we look at, like, the civil rights movement, and when we see everyone who is supporting Martin Luther King Jr. and supporting Medgar Evers and supporting John Lewis and supporting Malcolm X and supporting all these people, they just didn't go out and decide to do it. Yeah, they had to get their haircut somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, absolutely. Like, and they look good. You know what I'm saying? Like, Dr. King looking good was important to the audience that he was speaking to. So, I think that's beautiful. Yeah. But we can talk about this all. Sure, we really can. There's a couple other ones that you support, which I think would be kind of interesting. There is one that you oppose. Is that the only one that's right now? I guess two right there. Yeah. So that's and you can see that these have similar those two squatter, and those aren't the best. That's not the best term for
Yeah.
it. But
it's a nice like catchphrase.
it's a quick. What it does is it further defines squatter. It broadens what is colloquially known as squatter to put even more. It puts more benefit of the doubt with the landlord.
Okay.
So if you have a month to month and you're a day late, then you can get possibly get classified as a squatter.
Okay.
If you have a verbal agreement and you relinquish that verbal agreement and there's no writing, you could get classified as a squatter. And
well,
then,
even if you lost the writing, you know what I'm saying? Like,
sure.
Like thinking about
there's something on the landlord as well for them in that situation.
Yeah, and they could also lose it.
And they could lose. Yep, absolutely.
It's like without a benefit of a doubt.
Yeah.
So I think about like my neighbor who was facing eviction because she thought she had paid on time, and she's a little older and memory's not all the way there, and she didn't. She didn't pay on time, and it was like, thankfully didn't get an immediate eviction, whatever, didn't get defined as a squatter, but didn't have all the paperwork present at the time, doesn't have all that information that I was like, okay, like let's go figure it out. Let's put this together. And we were able to find like, okay, that payment didn't get through. Let's get it taken care of. Let's get you caught up, and let's make sure that like this is written down that you paid it on time, that these things are resolved, and that you are up to date, so that if there is a problem, even though there's not, you don't know where your lease agreement is, and was there one, and how was it written, and all those things, like you still have been at this house for a while, and it's beneficial for you to stay here because you want to be here. So this, from what I saw, one of the things that was interesting to me is it said remove the squatter within 48 hours or later period if necessary for reasons of public safety. So like, is that kind of standard, removing people from a property within 48 hours?
So that's one of the things that changes from current law. So right now the 48 hours, if somebody is, if a landlord were to utilize this law, put this into action, right now the time period is far longer than 40 hours.
Okay.
So one of the main parts of this is that it broadens the definition of squatter from where it currently is, and it lessens the time period that person has to go and find shelter somewhere else.
Okay.
So if so right now, lessening that puts someone on the street faster.
Yes.
And that's why
I mean, because honestly, like, let's say I have like a verbal agreement with you to stay in your house. Or to stay at a property that you're leasing, and we fall out of favor with each other, and nothing's written down. It's kind of a buddy situation, and maybe like I break something accidentally, and you're like, let's get this.
It's a family heirloom that's my most prized possession. And it was sitting in the middle of the room, primed to be knocked over by a backpack.
Yeah, exactly. And I go, and you go.
It's like, we're done.
Screw that guy. Let's get him out of here. And so you say, yeah, we don't have an agreement. He didn't have my permission. I told him to leave. I told him to get out of here, and he's still here. And, like, this person doesn't own anything here. Like, maybe they have some of their stuff, but, they're not paying their rent. They're not doing anything. They're just staying at my place right now, and I want to get them out of here. You could define me as a squatter and call the police and say, get this guy out. And I would have 2 days. Barely 2 days. 48 hours, which is like, if I'm gone for the weekend, and you decide to pull this into place, then I get back on Monday. I leave on Friday, I get back on Monday. All my stuff's on the lawn. The doors are locked. And if I try to get in and I say, no, we had an agreement. We talked on the phone. I can prove it. Well, sorry, bud. It's 48 hours. You weren't here to prove that. And one of the things it says requires the dispatched law officer to remove the squatter from the property unless the law enforcement officer discovers credible written evidence that the person is not a squatter. Now, credible written evidence, like, could be really narrowly defined as a piece of paper or something like that. But as a tech guy, as a person who understands how like technology works, when you make a video, you're actually writing it in code. But maybe a law enforcement officer or the legal person, somebody involved with that says, well, I don't care if you had a video of the two of you saying, you can stay with me tonight.
Sure.
Like that's not considered written evidence, credible written evidence, and we're going to go ahead and kick you out anyway.
Yeah.
Like, even if I file a lawsuit and try to get that, restored back to the property where we had an agreement and try and resolve these things, I still am homeless because I don't know anywhere where you can get a lease agreement or a rental agreement within 48 hours.
Sure, yeah.
Like,
and
very
that's
unlikely.
why a lot of even service providers for folks that are looking for housing, that have housing somewhat available, because there's very little housing available in Indiana. Just like it can take it'll take most folks 7 days or more.
Yeah.
Even professionals get housing for folks who find themselves newly in need. Yeah. And on a short timeline.
Well, and let's kind of play that out.
Yeah.
Story wise, and I think this is like interesting for me. Let's say I got kicked out of my place because I was defined as a squatter. I have to go to a hotel and stay a night. It's $100 a night, $60 a night, whatever. Then whenever I finally find a place, which, this has been disruptive, probably emotionally stressful, I finally find a place and they say, okay, well, you owe us first month's, last month's, and your deposit. Well, I just have been spending, on the low end, maybe $100 a night, $60 a night for a hotel. That's quickly eating into that. And if it's 7 days, there's $700. Let's say my rent is $800 and I need 20, what is it, 8, 16, 21, is that right? $2,400.
I can't do
you know what I'm saying? I'm so bad at it. So
you guys can check us.
Yeah, thanks internet. Hello internet. But like, let's say I want to that, whatever.
Yeah.
We get the concept. This is putting people in a bad position. This is putting people in a place where we have more homelessness, where we have more people who are more likely to turn to doing illegal things, like breaking into places to find a warm place to sleep. Losing out on the opportunity to actually have a place to live because they weren't able to keep enough money because it suddenly changed for them. And so, in my mind, as a person who experienced like a short period of homelessness, like it was very hard. Thankfully, I had a good support system at the time who let me sleep on couches that I didn't have to pay for a hotel. And I slept in my car when the weather was okay and turned the heat on. Like, I found a way to adapt to it, but not everybody has that opportunity. Yeah. Especially if you come from poverty. You don't have all of these resources that a lot of other people who came from low middle to like even, upper middle class have, like a car. Yeah. And maybe you don't have a car to sleep in. But and then, so like, we kind of looked at this before. Let's not go, if it's cool, let's not go too much into detail on this one. Yeah. One thing that we pointed out on the last bill, and if you all are joining on Instagram, youtube.com/@mffred, I'll put this up here for a second. But on here, we see I've sponsored this bill. So Senator James Tomes, Senator Mike Boachek, Senator Blake, and Senator Gary Byrne. On the last bill, it was 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats. So we can probably see that this is a concept or an idea that is important to the Republican Party that typically sides with, landlords and things like that.
Or these Republicans. I think sometimes there is diversity in the supermajority.
Oh, okay, cool.
And so
because I'm not as detailed in there, I might not see that. Yeah.
If we look at this right here, if we look at the history, we can see that it hasn't it did get. I was like, it hasn't been to a committee, but there it is.
Yeah, it has been referred to a committee.
Yeah. And so just seeing where and how far things get. And I think it is important, like, we need to take care of ourselves. We need to know what our bandwidth is. And so once that deadline comes of what's in committee or not, let's focus on what is getting traction in committee.
Yeah, totally.
And again, that's where like our experts, our nonprofits, and our others there that have lawyers that are in the state house and that are direct matters.
Popped out to me. Indiana State Sources, summary text supplement. And then over here we have summary text, amendment, supplement, a bunch of these. Yeah. Like, that to me seems like it's getting some traction.
There are things that are moving around and trying to make sure that it's like, well, okay, if this senator here is giving us guff about that line. Well, then let's just change that line.
Okay, cool.
Or
yeah.
it's about for the squatter definition. Well, 48 hours is really the sticking point. Like, what does it look like if we move that or lessen it? There was a bill 2 years ago that was seeking to further detain folks who were arrested on the because of a domestic abuse call. And so they can detain them for 48 hours. The bill was to detain them longer. Because in that situation, the longer that somebody who was arrested because of a domestic abuse call, the longer that they are detained, the likelihood that their victim will live and not be killed by that person exponentially grows. Okay. And so
like almost giving them, it's like, hey, we know as X person here, that like if a person has to sit in, you know, in jail for a couple days, they're probably not going to get chilled out enough to like think what they did, and
even their victim being able to
find a place. I mean, even looking different. At 48 hours trying to a week to find a new place. So like if I'm you know, let's say I abuse you, or in a relationship, I get locked up for 48 hours, and you don't have enough time to find a place. You don't have time to like deal with the emotions, to find a place, to reach out to family, and that person's already back in your house. Like, boom, you're back to the same violence. You're back to the same problems, potentially.
And that's a real life application of safety. Yeah. But in the basement of the state house where these committee rooms are. Yeah. Sometimes it's a negotiation of numbers. And so that's where when we are able to, and when we are in a place that we can share our stories, and we want to share our stories, that not making sure that it's not just a number that we're negotiating, but we're negotiating the effects on people's lives. Is really can have an effect. One thing that in this process as well, I want to note, I kind of found my political awakening in 2015 when I'm a church person, and like I saw this story more loud than ever of Christianity being told that wasn't what I saw every day with my community, and
you felt like kind of the government was using Christianity as a tool, you know, maybe as a way to obscure the reality of the harm that was maybe coming.
Well, and I think that's to say that hasn't always been the case in the modern American experience, I think is generous. But even the idea that now doing so blatantly and brazenly really mobilized me.
Do you remember what the like specific legislation, or what was it?
It was when Trump got any traction from the church community at all. That wasn't just the big the big loud abusers. But it was
the people who used.
It was Main Street now that was supporting horrific, deadly, and dehumanizing rhetoric without it being repulsive.
I feel that a lot too. I think it was a similar time where, you know, a lot of us who grew up in the church, and you know, obviously you've stayed in it and I haven't. You know, for me it was like understanding like these are the values and ideas that I really believed about Christianity that were really important to me, and I don't feel like that's being represented well because, you know, the Bible clearly says this and clearly says that, and like you're ignoring it, or you're writing it off because it's inconvenient for the movement that you want to see happen. And rather than, at least for me, like rather than accepting that like dichotomy and being honest about it, it was like, well, you're wrong. And I was like, no, I don't think I am. You know? And that for me like pushed me further away from staying in that. It seems like, you know, obviously we haven't talked like super in detail, but it's pushed you into saying, if you want this to be Christianity, I'm going to put just as much energy into this being the Christianity that I see.
Yeah.
That like the story that I see in the Bible and the community that I'm part of, and I feel like represents me and represents, you know, the historical Christianity throughout time.
Yeah, and I think what moved me to tell the better story in that situation has been a really rough road. Yeah. And I say all of this as we talk about like political engagement, like governance engagement. That's important that we put ourselves in the context of building resilience at the same time. We live in Indiana with a supermajority, and any supermajorities are bad. Yeah. With not having to answer, compromise, come to the table to make something better is bad for everybody. Yeah. And we see a lot of these different things. And so like when I say all of that when we do show up, when we do tell our story, to know that once is great and will probably not be enough. Yeah. And how do we care for ourselves in that process at the same time? When we share our story, when we go to testify, when we write that letter, and I've written many letters to many senators. I will tell you that the most brazen and disappointing ones have all come from Mike Braun when he was in Washington, D.C., pretty much saying, thank you, here's why I think you're wrong. Yeah. And that I'm not pretty much saying, and I'm not going to listen to you. Yeah. Where we have senators like Todd Young, who is of the same party, talking about diversity within the party, right? Yeah. Who is going to respond and say, I disagree with you, and here's what I'm trying to accomplish. Yeah. For the betterment of our Hoosiers. Yeah. And for things. I'm like, okay, great. We can have a dialogue in that.
Yeah, totally.
Instead of, hey, thanks for contacting me, but I think you're wrong, and I'm going to go ahead and listen to other people than you. Yeah. Just that kind of posture can be discouraging. And
yeah, totally.
When we put ourselves to oppose or to support something, we don't know until we try. Yeah. And the thing is that when we do that, we also find our people. And it doesn't need to be at the State House, but the opportunities of being active politically, but also being active for mutual aid in our communities is political. It's just not governance. Yeah. I just want to share all of that to say that as we are diving into these things, we talked about the diversity of response, the diversity of how we invest, but then also just knowing that we got to take care of ourselves and know that when we invest in something like this, it's not a one and done. It is for the long haul. So we have to find the sustainable way to do so. And to be able to be like, well, they moved the committee on me. I took 2 PTO days. I'm not going to be able to testify anymore. Who else can testify? Yeah. And you're like, I'll be back next year. You know, to know where those limits are, what those boundaries are, and how we know that I'll be back next year, or I'll be back in the summer when they're doing study committees and they're writing the bills for the next year. Yeah. And so like there is these different pieces that how do we do this in a way that we know that this isn't just for a season, but we're stepping in to know that like these are things that we're not going to stop caring about tomorrow, the next time, or the next time. Yeah. So how do we learn this process in a way that works for us? Cool.
I like that idea. And I think even for me to kind of share like my thought on that process too is like the reason why I'm doing these live streams, I set aside like Tuesday as kind of my day to do some sort of like activism or, you know, following the process, commenting on it, like trying to feel like I have some consistency in the way that I want to do impact on a public level. And like the reason why we're doing this conversation is because you have a different perspective than me on what is important and what is important to you. And like, I think because I really like you as a person, we've, you know, had a long journey together of like seeing each other going through different things and different changes and have a lot of like cool, deep conversations. Yeah. I'm like, dude, share your thoughts with me because I might be inspired to call somebody or send an email. I probably won't go down to the State House. I probably won't comment. And maybe I will on something at some point. Yeah. But this feels like a sustainable way for me. I really care a lot more about like caring for the community, doing fun art stuff, and giving people opportunities to do cool art stuff. Yeah. And like there aren't a lot of bills that are trying to make that illegal. But there are a lot of bills that will affect my friends who, are younger and are dealing with like the fallout of being a younger person and having less access to capital, less access to resources,
less access to housing stock because we're more than 10,000 units behind from Marion County.
Ooh,
we don't have enough units for the people that are here, and anything that's getting built is going to be $400,000 and more, which
$1,700 in rent for 1-bedroom apartments.
Which affects, because we need a healthy and robust art community in Indianapolis, and we can't have that if there's not places for us to rest and sleep and to rejuvenate to be able to bring that vibrancy to our communities.
And I think like as an artist, it's like we need that, but I think from like even a bigger perspective, it's like art is something that we have done since the beginning of humankind. With the earliest artifacts of humans that we find right now that like show kind of modern human, the modern brain structure and things like this is art. We find sculptures, wooden sculptures. The Venus of Willendorf is a great example. We find even like there's like this wooden sculpture of like a man that is like, I don't even know what it is. It's like we don't find a lot of that, a lot of things, but what we do find is things that are artistic in nature, that we didn't just make pottery, we made pottery with art on it. Like one of the first tools, I think it's the Acheulean point, I might be wrong about that, but it's once we stop going from rock hit stuff to beautiful shaped rock does certain thing. And so you start to get to this place where like art is something that defines our society, and I don't think it's because it's like pretty and woo. I think there's something like innately human about beauty, why we decorate, why my studio is filled with all this stuff. Like it's even back to whenever we were living out in the wild and we weren't indoor humans. We were making things that had beauty and that craftsmen would spend time on. I think there's an importance for that in our own value of ourselves and our culture. And like I say art's important, but like to maybe like Senator James Tomes or Senator Mike Boachek, he goes, "Shut up, you dum-dum. Art's not important. Like we're gonna evict you. You're a squatter." Maybe they don't.
And the thing is that if you're one of their constituents, the likelihood that they might actually meet with you to talk about that during or not during the session, and then you could actually know.
Yeah, totally.
And you can talk about what matters to you. And
maybe they play guitar and we just do a little jam sesh. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, you walk into their office and there's that guitar, and there's a conversation piece. For
I pick it up and go boodle, and I write a song on the spot, and I say, "This is a bad bill."
And then all of a sudden, we have healthcare.
You're welcome. You're welcome, America. Okay. We've been talking about this. I think we're like an hour and a half in, which is great.
Gosh, I
set that as my goal. As an hour and a half stream.
That's not bad.
We've made it, which is great.
That's not bad for us because we could get some more tea and go late into the night.
It's so true. I do think with some of these bills and like, obviously if you screenshot this on YouTube, you can see it and like whatever. You can look up all these individual bills for yourself. We don't have to go through all of these. Of these, this chunk that we have here, I'll give you some options. Do you want to like summarize a couple of the things that are important to you, or would you like to like dig in kind of deep like we have been into one of these bills?
I think that let's rapid fire
cool
through them, and then we can. If anybody, I don't know if we can see, but if anybody's like, that's the one, or
if you want to if you drop in the chat, we can dive in a little bit deeper, and maybe someone will comment later, and then we won't see it.
Well, but and Fred showed you both on the Assembly website and Legiscan where you can see a little bit more, and for all of these, like know where you get your news too. Like it's one thing, like this is good. For a good starting point is to catch a live on Instagram or to see a meme. I even created a sticker that's on my text messages that when I send something, I add it says "read not verified." Because so that people can be like, hey, this is what I don't have the time to like go read 3 other sources on this.
Yeah.
But like usually it's a joke.
Totally.
But
Yeah.
like Mirror Indy, WFYI, the Indiana Capital Chronicle are some really great places
Write these
to
down.
that for the most part aren't. Mirror Indy's a nonprofit. WFYI is a nonprofit. Their news isn't behind a paywall. And so those are some
You
great.
say the Capital Chronicle?
I believe that's what it is now. I'm saying it off the top of my. It's always just in my links. But they're a newer State House reporter reporting agency as well. Let's
see. Indiana Capital, not Capitol.
But those are some great places to read up on. To see if they're talking about your bills, but also find your experts. And so for me, for housing, I'm going to the Fair Housing Center of Central Indiana.
Okay.
There's an organization called Prosperity Indiana that works on housing and the empowerment of Hoosiers as well.
So it's Fair Housing Center, and then what was it?
Of Central Indiana, Prosperity Indiana.
Prosperity.
And one organization that is really close to I've really enjoyed doing a lot of interfaith work in Indianapolis over the last 10 years, and GMA is an acronym for Greater Indianapolis or Greater Indy Multi-Faith Alliance.
Ooh.
And they focus through
GIMA.
And they focus on housing Hoosiers as an interfaith and intrafaith
multi-faith
group.
is what I'm gonna put as like a little thing. GIMA. GIMA. Cool.
Yeah, but those are the experts that I go to. But like for the things that matter to you, find your experts, because those people have policy experts, and those people have folks that can help direct my energy so that I'm not spending it on my own. Mm-hmm. And so like
because and I didn't even know how the process worked. You know, which is. For me, it's like, whoa, I think that I should know. You know, I'm 35. You'd think that you'd understand those things. But I didn't know about it. And, like, I think what I see in this is, like, being able to understand the process or understand who to go to. You might be able to be more informed about that process. And then go, hey, I know that you're really upset about this bill. Not that important. Probably not going to get seen by the committee.
Sure.
It's actually just got dropped, and it's not going to go through. So I know you're upset. I know you're calling us, or I know that you're reaching out. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I think, like, you can easily get stuck in that and then feel like, oh, well, what was that bill for? Was it just a distraction?
Yeah.
Maybe it was. Maybe it was to get people mad and ignore something else.
Like the blue line.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
were able to gut Indianapolis for a lot of other infrastructure things just to pull back on that blue line bill.
Yeah, I mean,
so
we're maybe seeing parts of that with our snowplow situation.
Sure.
How my road is ice and my alley is ice, you know.
Possibly from that, I think this one went back a little bit further than that. But definitely, and where the political things happen, and so when we're people who get paid full time to do this, let's and who are in that process throughout the year. Yeah. How do we lean on them so that we can empower that work and not continue to? And maybe if you find that they're not focusing on something that you really do care about, you can help empower that work somewhere else.
Yeah, totally.
But until we know what's already there or who those experts are, then we're in a silo, and that's how. One of the big lies is that we're on our own in all of this. Yeah. And so when we find ourselves in silos, we got to look for each other, because it's because somebody else said that we're alone, and we're not.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's why I'm doing this.
Yeah.
You know,
and I love it. I love it. I love it. So real quick rapid fire on this. Okay. These 3 escrow bills are all very similar. And one of them is going to make it to committee and make it out, I hope. Yes. And this allows people when their landlord is not keeping up on like rodent control, exposed wires, mold, structural repairs for your building.
Yeah. Right. So let's say like let's say you move into a place and then you have animals.
Yeah.
And like
that aren't your pets.
Yeah. And like, even like, let's say you have cats or dogs or whatever, and they, out of nowhere there's like a ton of fleas in the place.
Sure.
And then you're like, why are there fleas here?
Or bed bugs.
Well, my cats never go outside, like what's going on? And then you see a little scurry guy go by and you're like, oh no, like these mice have fleas and they're giving them my cats. And then you call the landlord and they're like,
or that black spot grows in the bathroom on the ceiling.
Oh, yeah, right? Yeah. And then you call your landlord and they go, oh yeah, thanks for the heads up.
Mm-hmm.
You never hear anything
and it goes
back.
over and over and over again, and maybe because you've got an eviction on your file, they're doing it, what it looks like, and so it just compounds. And so
so like at this point, if you were my landlord and I called you about the black mold and the mice and all of that, what could I do to you? What could I do to hold you accountable?
Nothing.
Oh, okay.
Nothing.
So I can't withhold rent.
The minute you do that, I can evict you.
Ugh. And if that eviction thing comes out, then you can evict me in 48 hours.
Squatter and eviction looks a little different.
Because
we have a legal, when we have a lease.
Okay, cool.
It's a little different. But that's like you're connecting the dots.
Yeah.
But that dot doesn't connect.
Okay, cool. That's good to know.
Yeah.
And those are things that like could be confusing. It could be really overwhelming.
Sure.
Of being like, it's just the worst, and instead of being like, okay, cool, there are some of those different definitions. Cool.
Yeah. And so in this situation,
that still sucks.
Yeah, and you got to know the system that is being thrust on you that you haven't had to navigate before.
Well, and if I moved from another state where you could withhold rent,
we are one of the few places that currently you can't withhold rent.
Yeah, so like I was in Chicago, let's say I live in Chicago, and that same thing happened to me, and I just go, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to let them know, and then I'm going to withhold my rent until they fix it. And then I get evicted, and I'm like, what the heck? Like, this happened the other day. Like, I had the same problem. Like, what is the difference? Well, you live in Indiana.
Yeah.
And you're going to get evicted. Where with this, it seems like that's a little bit different.
Yeah, in our state, I think it's in good faith.
Yeah.
And so like with this allows a tenant to continue to say, listen, I'm good for the money.
Yeah.
You just got to earn the money and provide adequate housing as per our lease. And so it's pretty much saying you're in breach of contract, and now I am still out the money. The money's not in my bank account. It's sitting in escrow. And until I bought a house, I didn't know what escrow was.
Yeah, so it's like a third party is holding that money for you and guaranteeing that when things are resolved, that money will go to you.
Until the terms of that agreement are resolved.
Okay, so in this case, like, I can't say, well, I couldn't live in my house because of black mold. Maybe I have like an allergy to black mold. I think most people do.
Or black mold just in general is bad for your health, whether you have an allergy or not.
Yeah. And let's say I'm like, I can't live here. Yeah. I still have to pay rent. I still have to do that, but the landlord doesn't get it. Right. So it's not that I don't have to pay the rent.
Right. You're still good for it. You're still losing that money. Is still out of your bank account. Yeah.
So if I needed to go somewhere else, I still don't have extra money. It's not like I can use that money.
Right.
It's still going. So in my mind, it's still partially favoring landlords, but allowing some balance of power in some way to say, you can get that money once you fix the black mold.
Yeah. Yeah, and under this, there are certain stipulations of breach of contract that you would be able to do that for. It wouldn't be for everything, and so it'd be very specific. But those specific are about mold and pests and structural integrity. Yeah. If you read the book Evicted, you will learn. You'll hear plenty of stories about Milwaukee, who is pretty much a sister city to Indianapolis. Similar size, similar political makeup, and things like that. Yeah. But used to be similar housing laws. They have been able to clean their act up a lot.
Oh, that's cool.
And so it's a much better place to live than Indiana is currently under tenants, if you're a tenant. And so, but with that, about like, it doesn't matter if you have running water or not. You still have to pay rent in Indiana. It doesn't matter if you, like
I think what's interesting is like, you not only have to pay rent, but you have to give the rent to the landlord.
Right.
So even if they don't take care of it, it's kind of like,
right. So if they evict
I get the
you,
money.
then later on, they still have your money currently.
Yeah.
They have those 4 months that the window was broken.
Yeah. And there's, an owl flying in every night.
Or that there are 2 degrees. There are 2 degrees outside right now. Only 2 of them.
Only 2 of them.
And,
wow. In Celsius, that would be even less. We don't even have degrees.
But so like in the midst of that, like that's not just comfort or not.
Yeah, that's survival.
Yeah. And so without having any recourse for the bad landlords in those situations, Hoosiers are suffering. And living in fear that they shouldn't, and they're losing money in their bank accounts that they could that doesn't belong in the pockets of the landlords that they're not delivering on the product they said that they would.
Yeah, and I think like for sometimes whenever I look at these, like the context of some of these things, I like to put it into like a story for myself. So my grandma, for instance, rents, at a nursing home, or has her own little unit at a whatever retirement community, if you will. If they do not take care of that property for her, like, she has no recourse other than to just keep paying and keep complaining and keep paying and keep complaining. And now that might be shortening the lifespan for her, that, she doesn't have a lot of extra money to go anywhere because she's on a fixed income. Like, I think a lot of times we tend as people to kind of like assume positive intent on all of those sides of like, well, it's a middle-class white guy who's got enough money, and he's just being a dick and trying to withhold his rent, for one tiny thing. Yeah. Rather than thinking, it might be your grandma or your grandpa. It might be your mom or dad who, was recently injured or unable to do things. That this could be you. Yeah. This could be you down the road. And maybe you got lucky and you owned a home until you got a little older, and then you realize that, oh my God, I'm living in a nursing home, and there's all of this black mold everywhere, and no one's cleaned it. Sure. And I just saw a mouse run across my bed. Like, what can I do? And to be able to then say, yeah, I'm not going to pay you all until this is resolved. Like, you're going to have to suffer in some kind of way and have to deal with that problem. And once it's resolved, it can be involved. Right. Like, and I think by having that, escrow idea, there's visibility to what's happening as well. Like, there's some power in telling the court or telling whoever is the escrow holder, like, you're the one who's seeing this. You're the one who's seeing that this isn't working. Maybe that can be escalated.
And it brings the burden of proof to a different. It puts the burden in a different scenario. If you've ever have, GIMA has the Greater Indian Multi-Faith Alliance has an eviction court monitoring program.
Oh,
where
really?
The eviction filings in Indianapolis are really sparse on any kind of actual like congruent data. Yeah. And so they actually have folks who go and sit in our township eviction courts and record that data. But the burden of proof and the burden is on the person who is fighting an eviction.
Okay.
And in this kind of a situation, you still have to bring the evidence to bear. Yeah. But before anybody gets money, the landlord now has to take action. Yeah. It's forcing the hand of the landlord, where an eviction forces the hand of a tenant. So like this kind of shifts that power to a degree. Yeah,
it gives it some balance. It still feels pretty imbalanced.
It still very much is, but this at least starts with a system that has clear guardrails on how we can hold those contracts so people to fulfill those contracts the way they said that they would.
Yeah. It keeps something that I feel like growing up conservative, it's like take you at your word. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're a person who you take you at your word, you do your word, like that's great. Like do it. You know what I'm saying? Like I want to take you at your word. But I know you're just gonna breeze over these really quickly. We got into the details.
Yeah, we'll hit these. These last ones here, the insurance cap one, the SB 24. Right now, insurance is bonkers for everything, everywhere, every market, and we're seeing insurance prices for homes skyrocket by even like hundreds of dollars a month. And depending on where an insurance company is paying attention this year as opposed to next year.
Yeah.
So this one just caps that insurance growth to 10%.
Okay.
And
so you can't be in your house one year and then it says actually it's 50% more because we just don't like you today.
Yeah, and so that goes with even some of the other bills on like freezing property tax for Hoosiers that are 65 and older. Like how do we make sure that people that are on fixed incomes can stay in their homes as long as possible? Yeah. And this is one of those things.
Okay.
And that
if
we move forward, this goes to stability, not specifically housing, but leans into healthcare, which when we're not healthy, it's difficult to maintain a healthy home.
Yeah.
And so these just touch on a couple of other things. Decriminalizes having testing strips.
Oh.
If you have testing strips to check if there's fentanyl in, so maybe you can't afford prescription drugs.
I think I have one back there, actually. Yeah.
And so if you can't afford, if it's difficult to afford a prescription drug, maybe you could, if you happen to go outside legal means to get maybe a Xanax or to get different things that help you function during the day. Yeah. With the fentanyl crisis, it's really anything can have fentanyl these days, and so you can be charged by having those testing strips.
Wow, that's really interesting.
I don't believe it's a primary offense, but you can get
and that even
trumped
plays,
up in that way.
That even plays for me because we do the quantum cavern, and like any time that you have young people partying, there are drugs present. Yeah. And whether you like it or not, like you have to find a way to help keep people safe from it being a problem. I was talking to somebody, another like party promoter, where someone had an overdose. Yeah. Was it fentanyl, whatever? They had Narcan, thankfully, and were able to get that person alive. Ambulance obviously had to come, but like that is absolutely terrifying, especially when we know that a lot of people, and even for me, like I started smoking weed because I had, as funny as it is, nerve damage in my balls. And it felt like I'd just been kicked in the nuts. Like every single day I woke up, it sucked. But
thank you.
What worked really well was smoking weed. And the medication that I had been provided by my doctor made me sleep, 14 to 16 hours every night. I was 27, 26, something like that. Like I couldn't do that. Couldn't make that a reality for me. The next medication didn't work. And then the one after that didn't work. And then I was on a business trip in Colorado and I got some weed. And for the first time, I was like, oh. I can notice that there is pain and it doesn't hurt. And so I started using that as a way, like at night being able to get to sleep and going to sleep well. Like that gave me an opportunity, but it was illegal here in Indiana and still is illegal here in Indiana. And so it's like now, that has changed for me. I don't have that pain. I don't need to use weed to like deal with pain on a daily basis, but like I can only imagine if we knew that weed had some other drug in it that could kill you, and I was testing that to be safe, because all I need it for is this, specific issue that I'm dealing with. Yeah. I don't want to get messed up. I don't want to whatever. Yeah. Like that doesn't even give you that opportunity. And I think knowing that, and for us, like if we're trying to do these, shows traveling around, I would like to have that on site. So if somebody does want to, test the drugs that they have, whether I like that they're doing drugs or not, I would rather someone be safe. Right. And us to have a conversation the next day about, hey, I saw you use that test strip. I'm really glad that you tested. What help do you need? How can we get you help? Like, if somebody's alive the next day, they can find help.
Absolutely. And that goes into the next one, too, with the expanding syringe exchanges to the VA. And so like bringing that to our vets as well. And making that funding available for that kind of a program. And in the State House, it goes both ways. People want to get rid of syringe exchanges. And here we are with a bill that wants to expand what that looks like. But I think in just what you said there is, how do we get people to tomorrow? How do we make today bearable so that we can get to tomorrow and go again? And
I mean, that's like, if I was, I mean, my dad was a veteran, like seeing how long it took for him to get the proper care that he needed for his schizophrenia. He was honorably discharged from the military for bipolar disorder that ended up becoming schizoaffected subtype bipolar. Like that took years and years for him to get fully approved at 90 to 100% disability.
Sure.
And it wasn't until I was in my 20s that happened. Access to Medicare, his need to work, the only job he could really find was working night shift as a security guard on his own, which was not helpful for his mental health.
Sure.
Like these types of things they aren't going to affect the individual. They're going to affect families. They're going to affect, me. They're going to affect you.
Yeah.
Like the people who he interacts with, whenever he's messed up and not able to get the care that he needs. By expanding this to the VA and putting those things in play, I think it really becomes, it's acknowledging the reality of what we need.
Yeah, absolutely.
This last one, prior authorization.
So right now,
this is also opioid use related.
And these are things that when we're talking about diseases, when we're talking about conditions, it's easy in the narratives that we hear to be demonized in the midst of having a substance use disorder, or like in the midst of these different conditions that happen, instead of the opportunity to like, how do we be generous to the care to get you what you need? And one of those things is that right now there's within the system there can be a need for a prior authorization to receive the health care that you need from insurances.
Okay, so
if
like,
you have opiate use disorder.
Okay, so let's say let's put it in the context of a veteran.
Sure.
Let's say I was deployed over in Afghanistan, and IED goes off, and it messes up my leg, and the pain medication that they're giving me is just not really working. And my buddy's a drug user. I'm out of work and I'm hanging out with whatever, and they're like, "Hey, buddy, try this," and I try it, and the pain goes away, and then I go back to my medication, doesn't work, and maybe I do it once a month. I just need a break from this pain. I'm going to shoot up for tonight. Then that goes down the road. That becomes something that becomes every month, every week, every day, multiple times a day. And this person, has maybe never admitted this. Maybe they told their doctor, yeah, the medication you're giving me is working really well. Not saying that they're blowing, hundreds of dollars on, fentanyl or whatever else. And then comes down the road and they finally, this is ruining my life. I want this to change. I want to have another path forward. And they go and they say, I need drugs to get off opiates. And they go, you never told me you were using opiates. You never told me that was happening for you. Like, we're not going to give you the drugs. We're not going to give you the help because we've not proven that. You've not shown that. You're now coming here. Look, we're going to take a little while. We're going to see if you're actually going to drug test. You're going to do all these things so that you can be approved to get the help that you need. Meanwhile, they're continuing to use drugs that might be dangerous. In my understanding of this, this says like, hey, we can give you those drugs in the meantime while we verify these things to help you. Like, we'll trust you. We'll trust that you are an opiate user, that you do need something, methadone or whatever, that you do need another drug to help you, like, get off of this drug. And we're not just going to let you sit in limbo when you want help. Is that kind of like an understanding or maybe a context?
The prior authorization could even go as far as that you might have opioid use disorder and you need another operation or healthcare entirely as well.
Oh,
and so
okay.
like these are the things of within our insurance system is if we invest in you, will you keep needing money from us?
Oh, okay.
And so like prior authorization means, ooh, that's going to be expensive.
Ooh,
we need to double
okay.
check.
Yeah.
That, and that's where like the insurance doctors get involved and everything else.
Okay.
And depending
so you get
on
stuck in insurance limbo.
you very much can, or you can just give up. which is what so many, whether it's in this situation for prior authorization for opioid use disorder, or whether it's prior authorization for a heart condition, or prior authorization for other things.
Yeah, like cancer. I think a lot of people.
Sure.
I mean, even for me, like my dad died of a heart attack in his 50s. He wasn't as healthy as I was. You know, I try to work out a little bit more and eat a little bit better and don't smoke as much and don't drink as much. But like having on my record that my dad, you know, died of a heart attack, my grandpa had a heart attack, my uncle had a heart attack, gives me some access to healthcare earlier in my life to make sure that I'm on the right path.
Yeah.
So like this would mean like, hey, if you have opioid use disorder, then we're going to make you jump through a lot more hoops and make this a lot harder on you to get other kinds of care, like maybe heart care or you know, maybe a surgery that you need because we're like, hold on, was this caused by you doing opioid? You know, like,
well, and I think it's more the idea from the insurance perspective is just like, how are we making sure that we're not spending money that is, and in the medical field, and I'm not an expert at all in that regard, but especially in recovery and different things, there are a lot of people that develop a substance use disorder because of a recovery from an operation or in the midst of all of these different things. And so
I had a friend that OD'd that way, like a good church-fearing God, you know, going to church every single week, helped me with my budget when I went to church, like great dude who died of an overdose, accidental overdose.
Yeah,
you know?
and substance use disorder isn't a moral issue. It's not a moral condition. It has nothing to do. Being an asshole's a moral condition. And so, in the midst of that, this would give the opportunity for people to receive the health care that they need without having to jump through more hoops that would delay it.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've been doing this for like 2 hours. I love this.
Welcome to a conversation with Joel and Fred.
I know, it's absolutely nuts. So, obviously, for people who are actually watching this live stream, if anybody has made it this far, if you made it this far,
watch the replay on 2x speed.
Exactly, and there are a lot more bills that are coming up. So if none of this really spoke to you, like there may be other bills, and I use ChatGPT a lot to kind of find those things. You may be able to put in to ChatGPT and say, hey, I really care about this. Are there any bills in the state of Indiana that I should be aware of?
Well, even go back to Legiscan real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Legiscan's a really cool. If you look in the top left corner, you've got state Indiana bill number, and you can search the full text of the bill as well.
Yeah.
And so
like, if I wanted to marijuana, because I know that there's currently a bill that is supposed to.
There's a handful of
medical marijuana, legalization of cannabis.
Yep.
Yeah, 100% match.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with these, you can click on, if you click on the bill, and scroll down just a little bit.
I know Zach Payne. We went to church together.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You want to know something about Zach Payne? As long as it's the same Zach Payne. Let me look. Hold on.
Well, while he looks real quick, Zach is also a co-sponsor of that immigration bill that I was talking about.
So Zach used to play drums when I was growing up together.
Yeah.
We were not in a band together, but we were in like similar bands. We actually practiced the same place. We played all the same shows together. Zach was on his way home with a couple of our friends. They got in an accident, and everyone other than Zach died in the car. Zach was not supposed to walk, not supposed to move, was supposed to be paralyzed his whole life. We lost. Like,
that's horrible.
Yeah, and like he survived and made a full recovery, and obviously is like doing things out there in the world, and trying to legalize cannabis.
Yeah.
And that makes a lot of sense as a person who grew up in the hardcore and like punk rock scene that we grew up in, who had to recover from a really, really like debilitating injury, and lost people in his life. There probably are things that I disagree with Zach on. I would dare to say.
Yeah.
But the fact that this is something that he has put his time and energy behind as something he wants to see happen is, I think, really, really important, and like one of those things that we can kind of like bridge the aisle on.
Yeah.
And maybe this is what I'll give Zach a call about next week. Is, hey man, I hope you're doing well.
Absolutely.
I haven't talked to you in years, but here's what I'm thinking. I hope you,
Absolutely.
it seems like your family's good. You know what I mean? It's a way that we can connect. And maybe the next time that I see a bill, I can say, I'm from the same place. We grew up together in a lot of senses. I don't like that bill, and I think you should rescind it, or I think you should change your mind on it, or go.
Why is that bill important to you?
Yeah.
Why did you put your name on that bill?
Yeah.
And to have that conversation, because you know it.
Yeah.
And like you can be where our paths run into each other, and we can celebrate those things. When we play board games, we say friends before, friends after, never during.
That's fun.
And the opportunity to be able to see the humanity in somebody, we don't always have that capacity. Yeah. But when we do,
and a lot of people don't give you that capacity. Like you probably know Zach Payne from the legislation world, and you didn't know that story.
Yeah.
And I only did because we grew up together. Yeah. Because I mean, they were coming from my friend's house, the band that I was in, coming from his house when the accident happened. Crazy thing is they hit an ambulance. Like, absolutely just wild situation. So for a lot of people in my community, that was a huge loss. And it's wild. I can't even remember the guy's name who died. But he was a lead singer of, a little pop punk band, the whole swoop, scene kid, emo kid, and it was super debilitating for a lot of my friends who were really close to them. And I mean, to see that connection that I luckily and sadly also have. I think that this is a lot closer to home than, especially in Indiana. And that's what I've realized more and more is that we're not that far away from people who, what's up, Nate from Florida? We're talking about Indiana legislation, so we're almost done.
Welcome to the party.
Nate and I used to work together. What a good guy.
Awesome.
But yeah, I think that this has been super informative. This has been super helpful. Yeah. One for me to have a new resource to go to and some things that I can pay attention to. And next steps for me on what I'm going to do next week on Tuesday with my live stream.
There you go. There you go.
But yeah, I wanted to here, let me put it on us. So if you want to get these notes that we wrote down.
Oh, sure.
We've got some lovely little notes that you can use there. I just wrote those down as we were talking. But is there anything that kind of coming to the end of this that you feel like you want to point out? We've talked everywhere. So if you're bored with talking,
no, I just want to reiterate, and for those that are joining now, 2 hours in, that weren't here at the beginning, I think especially this week being the week that it is, it's really there's a lot out there that is vying for our attention to tell us a story that they want us to believe.
Yeah. I mean, Elon Musk did 2 Nazi salutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's super distracting from this. And, and I even was considering should I change this live stream that we'd already talked about to talk more about that. And anyway. Continue.
Well, and I think that the thing is that when we talk about Elon Musk and his salutes, the thing is that I don't have a connection to Elon Musk.
Yeah.
I don't have much of a connection to much of what's going on in Washington D.C. Yeah. But I do know that in the 2 block radius surrounding my house, only 4 people have bought houses, and corporations have bought all the other houses that have been up for sale. My neighbor, the land is not owned in my neighborhood by my neighbors, and
this land is your land, this land is their land, I guess.
and so in the midst of that, whether it's getting involved in the legislature and building power in this way, I just want to encourage us to give credence to our voices, your voice, and that your voice does matter. And while we saw a lot in these last 2 days that might tell us that it doesn't, to know that when we have these conversations about the things that we care about, our voices grow stronger in accord. And that's the beauty of life, and that's what we have to do, and that is what we have a choice to give and to tell a different story, and instead of letting someone else tell a story at us. How do we focus on the story we're writing? And that means paying attention to your voice and what it can do.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's great. Those are great notes. Get involved in your own way. Be your own person. You don't need to be like me and Joel. Find the way to give back in your community and to let people know that they are cared for and loved.
Because you're cared for and loved.
Hell yeah. By somebody, and if not, by us.
Yeah.
Hey, love y'all. Thank y'all so much for taking the time.
Yeah.
If you're watching this later and this is all, boring and old news, I hope that the things that we opposed got opposed and things that we wanted to pass got passed. And maybe we'll look back at this and this will be really funny.
Yeah, sometime we should find something we disagree on.
I would love that.
And we should have that conversation.
Oh, here's my kitten. Oh my gosh. We gotta do
eating
a kitten.
stuff.
Get over here. Where you going?
Just ran into the
You
mirror.
just ran into the mirror. Get over here. We're gonna end the live stream with a kitten.
You're new in the world. You don't know how mirrors work.
You thought that was a door, but that was just a mirror.
It was you.
Oh, look at little
there it
Chitty.
is.
This is Chitty.
Hi,
Chitty the kitty.
Oh yeah.
What you doing, little
hi.
baby?
Oh hi.
All right, we're gonna end the live stream. We got